Hey guys, welcome to Just Be Handy. Today I'm going to rebuild that carburetor that came off of the Timber Bear mcCulloch. It's a Walbro HDB carburetor, and I was able to get the Timber Bear illustrated parts from mcCulloch's website. Just under the service portion, you could look up old manuals, and it has this carburetor with parts in it. And it did mention that there's two carburetor kits, and that's what I ended up getting, both kits, a major and a minor. The minor is the D10 HDB, which just has the gaskets and the diaphragms. And then the major has the screens, it has the retaining clip, it has the needle, a new needle in it. So it depends on what you need. Once you get into it, you can take a look. I've got both kits because even though that I use non-reformulated fuel, I'm probably going to need to go into it at least once every 5 to 7 years. With the reformulated fuel, you might even need to go into it twice a year. I mean, not twice a year, once every 2 years. Tools you need is most likely if you go with the major kit and you need to change that screen for the check valve, you'll need a small needle nose pliers that can actually capture that clip and compress it without it popping away at you. Number 2 screwdriver is good for these little Phillips screws at the bottom here. Float needle is, and also the regulator, diaphragm. Here you've got your fuel pump, so you just need a good big screwdriver, flathead that fits in there properly. Another tool that I use is shop air at 20 psi in case I need it to clean a little debris off after I spray some carb and choke cleaner. Make sure that your carb and choke cleaner states that it removes gum on it. So you need it to be able to get rid of gum and varnish. That is very important. If it doesn't state that, don't use it. It won't get a lot of the stuff loosened up. Some people like to use brake parts cleaner. It doesn't have some of the solvents in it to really clean out your carburetor, and it also may affect the diaphragms because it's more harsh in some areas with the solvents it uses. And then I recommend nitrile, not vinyl gloves, because they do hold up to carb spray, and if there's any fuel that's in there, they don't melt on you and start to tear up. At least they hold up a little bit longer. So those are the things you need to get started. So let's get into this baby right now and find out what we need and what we don't need. Do we need the major kit or the minor kit? And this should be fairly clean because I did clean it before, but I did not replace the parts. And when it started smoking, when the chainsaw started smoking because it was ingesting the bar oil, that's when I knew I had to get into the whole engine. But you could see Walbro does a nice job of putting pins so that when you try to put things back together, they only fit a certain way. And here's the throttle valve stop and the needle adjustment for the throttle valve, so you know that the stop needs to go there when you put it back together. And your low and high needles. Everything is labeled fairly well on these. I really like these carbs. All right, so without further ado, let's get into this. I'll put these things aside and we'll get back into it a little bit more. All right, guys, so we've got the carburetor here, and then I've got a nice clean surface to work on. So what we'll do is take off the top fuel pump portion and put it here on the left, and then all the needle stuff on the right, or I can also put them in these containers. It's always good, like if you have anything that rolls away, to put into containers. So I've got those ready just in case. All right, so right now I'm going to just start taking apart the fuel pump area. And like I mentioned a few years ago, I did get into this carb because the saw wasn't running well until I figured out it was ingesting bar oil. So that's what we have to work with here. All right. And then you can see here both diaphragms have little tabs on them that go to the one side and they line up with this tab. So we'll get this these off of here, and remarkably they're softer because I usually use the non-reformulated fuel, but you can see it's kind of gummy. So it will definitely need to be sprayed with some the Gumout carb cleaner, just because of how gummy it is, to make sure everything flows. The screen, as you could see, looks really clean. So like I said, I did get in there and clean it, so that I don't see any debris in there that would be causing it to get clogged. So those are the filter and diaphragm for the fuel pump. Now we'll get into the fuel metering portion, where it has the needle and a metering diaphragm that acts like a float. It has that metal piece that helps to actuate the needle and open and close the needle. So we'll put all these screws over to the right, again keeping everything for the fuel pump area on the left of me, which is probably more of the bottom of your screen, and that's the top of your screen. And take your time, guys. Don't rush. There's no race here. The more you take your time, the better. Okay. That came off easy. Again, you see how gummy it is. Now, a telltale sign if this is really bad because of reformulated fuel is the diaphragm will be crispy and it will click when you move it back and forth versus being soft. And notice, guys, the gasket is between the carburetor and the diaphragm, and you have the diaphragm against the body. So again, that's the same as it has it in the illustration. Diaphragm against that plate and gasket against the carb body. And that's how we found it. So actually this diaphragm isn't too bad. I can move it without it clicking. You probably saw my Zuma Carb rebuild. That one was so bad it was making a clicking sound. This one is still flexible, but we won't mess with that anymore. So next we're going to go into here, and we have to be careful. We're just going to look around and see if there's any debris underneath here, because that's where the check valve is, and this is controlling the needle valve. Another thing to look for is that actuator for the needle valve is the same level as the body, because if it's above, when the diaphragm is trying to actuate it, it will not actuate it enough, so you won't get enough fuel. And if it's too low, again, you won't get enough fuel. Or if it's too high as well, it may stick open and you will get fuel just running through your carb if it's not adjusted properly. So you have to be cognizant of that and be careful. Now notice again, they make it really easy for everyone to work on. That plate's only going to go in one way. You see there's a tab there that goes into that groove. And then there's these pins to make sure that the plate goes on properly again. So again, we're going to take this plate off, and I'll just let it drop here. It's good to have a little magnetic screwdriver. That's why I like this screwdriver, because it'll hold on to the screws while you're moving it. Okay, next, when you take this plate off, try to have it pop out, but if you can't, I don't like to pull it from the needle, but just gently do it. There's a spring underneath there, so be careful with that. There we go. And you see there's the gasket for that one. You have to make sure you figure out which gasket that is and put the spring down. Now we're going to look in here, and there is a little bit of gunk, but it's not too bad. I bet if I hit it with just carb cleaner, this will clean up really well. You see that retaining ring in there with the screen? The check valve is under there. So what I'm going to do next is remove the slow jet and the high jet, the low jet and the high jet, and spray carb cleaner through everything to make sure everything is working. And then I think I just will do the minor rebuild with just the gaskets, because it is fairly clean, and go from there. Just it'll get rid of all this gumminess and all that. So next we'll remove, the low adjustment screw here and the high adjustment screw here, and that way when I put them back together I will know which one goes where. Looks like this adjustment screw is a little bent. It still works though. All right, so high and the low. And then this one is just for throttle. I'm not going to worry about that. So next we'll just get some of this carb cleaner. I have the garage door open. I'm in a big pole barn, so don't do this inside your house. It is very, very stinky, and it is very caustic. You don't want to be breathing this stuff. So from here, I just put it in the high adjustment. Make sure it goes through. The low, make sure it goes through. And then when you spray this solvent, it just kind of loosens everything up. And just go into each one of the holes and then spray. And definitely make sure you are careful when you're doing this, because it can spray you back in the face. Make sure you put everything away, and then just go through any of the vacuum holes and so on. Now we spray the other side. This is the fuel line, goes in here, so we'll put it in here, and there we go. You want to try and get all these holes. Now you get the shop air, and at 20 psi, and I know some guys will say, oh, don't do that, but see, 20 psi is not going to hurt anything. It just makes sure all the dirt gets to fly away. And you can see it's very clean now. There's a little, the varnish is gone and everything is pretty clean. So we'll just hit it one more time. Okay. I'm also going to take another one of these rags and just wipe it down so that we can get debris off. These are kind of lint free, so they work really well for this kind of work. And you want to make sure that the surfaces are going to be nice and dry too. Again, there's no dirt in these screens at all. And then we'll just get in here and just give it a nice little wipe to just grab any debris that might be sitting in there. And this is just a minor kit. We're not going to go all the way in and get that check valve out. All right. We're going to open up this throttle and make sure we hit all these holes. All right, so we can start building this thing back up, and that is going to be the minor rebuild. So first thing we want to do is take that minor kit, the D10 HDB, and then I'm going to open that up and show you the new parts. And I'll put all the new parts here so we know not to mix them up. And this kit's going to include the different variants of that HDB carburetor. So as we go to build the bottom side with the needle, we have to figure out which one of those gaskets it really used. So let's just move this needle out of the way. And oh, by the way, while you're at this point, just make sure that tip on the needle is good. So look at it really close, and you can see it is still good. It doesn't have a ring around it. I'm going to just clean that so it seats properly and put it to the side. And now we want to get this gasket off, and we'll just need the screwdriver to just help us get it off of here. It's stuck pretty good. There we go. And because it's stuck pretty good, it's leaving some material on the edge and tearing. So we'll have to clean that up pretty good before we put the new one on. But we want the equivalent gasket. So there should be two variants for that. Here we go. And you have to figure out which one it's closer to. And it looks like it's closer to this one. So we'll end up using that gasket there. And so the easiest way to get this off is, again, use some carb cleaner on it. And that'll loosen everything up. Just let it sit for a while. Then we'll take a little scraping knife and we'll scrape that clean. So sometimes when these saws get a little old, these gaskets do stick pretty good. There we go. Now it's starting to come off. We'll hit it with more carb cleaner to loosen it up. Kind of let it soak in for a few, and then that way it'll scrape off real easy. There we go. Alcohol, but you want to make sure that little hole is open there. I don't know if you can see that with the camera, but you want to make sure that hole is open so that it helps to meter to the check valve. All right, so I'll just hit that again and just make sure it gets as clean as possible before we put the new gasket on. And then as you can see, there's two gaskets like we said. So it'll be this gasket and it'll go this way. And you can see that little hole gets to be captured there. We want to put the spring in there. And it goes into this little seat for that spring. And then get that needle valve and put it in there. Okay. And just hold that needle back as you put this down, and that should get everything to line up. There we go. There, the spring is up. And then you just want to make sure that gasket is in there right, and then it'll go down. So take your time and then make sure you can actuate it there. Now we can put those screws in. Again, it's nice to have a magnetic screwdriver if you've got one. And just start it for now. Don't go torquing it up. Okay, now we tighten this one and tighten this one. Next, you just want to check that that's the same level as the top here. You take a straight edge like this and you just run it over, and you should see that it's about the same height. It shouldn't be much lower than that, and it's just touching, if you could see that. It's actually not touching, just up to it. So that's about right. What I'm going to do is actually pull it up just a little bit to make sure it touches, because that'll give us a little bit better fuel metering. There we go. There. I'm going to leave it at that. Okay, so next is going to be the gasket below the diaphragm, and then the diaphragm. So this will go this way, and then the diaphragm will go with the metal part down here. Okay. Then make sure the two there we go. Now that's aligned. Then we take the cover, put the cover on, and then put in the 4 screws that go on here, and we'll crisscross the screws just to make sure it goes in properly. So that's one. Oop. It's hard to work with gloves sometimes. That's why you usually see me not working with gloves, but I don't want to get the carb cleaner into my skin. Okay. We have this fuel metering portion done. Now it's time to do the fuel pump. Now, they gave us a different type of gasket here, and this one, as you could see, is pretty much different than the old paper-like gasket. It's a more of a fiberglass type gasket. And as you remember, it was sitting like that. And then we would go with the paper gasket that would go over that. And you definitely have to match up which type it was. And let's see, is that the same? Sorry. Holes all line up. There's the different one here. It's a different material. And you can see the holes are still in the same position. And which one am I going to go with, the paper or this one? It looks like they went with this material here. So we'll do that and put it in. All right, so let's put this on here, and it would go this way. Okay, and this will go, again, this tab here is for that throttle, so we know it goes this way. And it goes into some dowels, and then put in this big screw and make sure it's nice and tight. There we go. So that is the minor carb rebuild. Now we'll put in the high jet, was here. Okay, and the low jet was here. And then I'm going to turn them all the way in and then turn them out a turn and a half, because that's usually the best position to start out in, is about a turn and a half each. So that's in. And then you could tune it from there. But wait a second, yeah, I'll just do that. I'll just do a turn and a half. So there's the flat. That's one, and then a half. The flat is facing there, so we'll go one and a half. There we go. That's 1 1/2 for each one of them, and we're done. This is the minor carburetor rebuild, ready to go. We made sure we sprayed carb cleaner through everything, 20 psi, low pressure, everything looks clean, everything was flowing well, and now we'll just put the carb kits away. And I do have two gaskets for the major portions, and I have that backup kit. So this diaphragm is actually, it's on the verge of not being usable, so we'll just forget about that one. Anyways, thanks for joining me at Just Be Handy. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and again, we are in the part of rebuilding this mcCulloch Timber Bear saw. But now, if you don't even have the mcCulloch Timber Bear saw, you know how to build an HDB Walbro carburetor. Really well made, and it's a nice carb. So again, thanks for joining us, and God bless.